I just wanted to share a couple of things. First and foremost, I, as Amy told you, I'm an avid gardener, and I chose this topic mainly because I wanted to learn more about using worms for composting. So it's not anything that I've actually done myself, but after doing some intense research, I find it to be pretty easy, and I think I'm going to try it. Uh, so let's get started. Um, as we get started, this being Earth Day, we're going to have our first trivia question right off the bat. All right, so officially the first Earth Day celebration was held on which of these dates? Was it May 25th, 1995? Was it April 22nd, 1970? Was it July 4th, 1969? Or was it November 29th, 1962? And to answer, if you would, just go ahead and type it in the chat, and Amy, I will share the correct answer after we get some responses. So who has responded with the correct answer? And sorry about that. I do have dogs here in my house. Can't hear you, Amy.
Duh, you think I know better by now. Jody from the Twinsburg Library said B. She was the first one to get it in, and several others said B as well.
Excellent. So that is the correct answer. D is actually my birthday. I just thought I'd put it in there. Okay, very good. All right. So let me go to the next slide. All right. So, first and foremost, I wanted to kind of just give you a little bit of information about what's the dilemma with food waste, right? So there is, as it turns out, 31% of all the food that's produced in the US actually ends up in the garbage. Now, I think over the last year, we recognize that not only is that a bad idea for potentially the environment, which is something I'm going to explain a little bit more, but there's a lot of people that struggle. And so not all of that food waste is actually food that's not usable for people. So this is definitely a topic not only for people to consider just food waste in general, but food waste actually ending up into our garbage system has been and continues to be a problem. So most of the time, where does the food waste end up? Well, if you live in a small city like I do on the west side of Cleveland, we definitely have municipal landfills. I read some statistics that anywhere between 30 and 40% of the material that goes into the landfills is food waste. And if you live in a more rural community, you may already know that it's pretty costly to hire waste haulers to come get your garbage, or you may have to drive a long distance to take your garbage and food waste to a drop-off site. And last but not least, kind of historically, if you're in rural communities, you may have in the past used burning to dispose of your waste, which in many locations has been outlawed because there are health-related issues with using that. So, there are some alternatives. All right, so the other thing that I thought was important is to kind of give you some information about, what are the current statistics in terms of how food waste is actually managed. So the US EPA actually has done a study and has kind of modified their sampling technique a little bit, but that's not the point. The point is we can now look and see how food waste has been dealt with and what are the methods. So I think the key points to show or to highlight here is you can see that landfilling of food waste still is the main method for disposing of the waste. Now, there has been an increase in collecting the food waste to burn and then generate energy from that. That's the blue band that you can see. and other food management techniques like I said, collecting, food that hasn't been spoiled and kind of redistributing that to food banks or going to restaurants and trying to recover that kind of food waste. Um, and then you can also see the amount of food waste that's actually been composted over the years. So, it seems like since about 2000 to about 2017, there has been some increase, but the vast majority has been other food management, right? Okay, well, again, I'm trying to emphasize that we do have estimates for where food waste goes, and so as I just kind of highlighted, most of the food waste ends up going into landfills, right? And it says almost 56% of the waste is actually going into a landfill. Now, you may not know that once that food waste goes into the landfill, it does start to break down. There are definitely microbes and organisms that are in landfills that can start to break it down uh, aerobically. That means in the presence of oxygen. But during this decomposition stage, a gas is produced, right? And that gas is methane. And as it turns out, typically it says within a year or less, then the conditions within the landfill really start to be anaerobic. So that decomposition is happening in the absence of oxygen. And so it really starts to pump out, potentially pump out methane. Okay, so you're probably saying, okay, so what? There's methane gas coming out. Well, methane is only half of the gas that actually would be emitted out of a landfill. 50% is also carbon dioxide, right? And so these landfill gases, as they're described here, are, if you don't already know, are really, really strong greenhouse gases. All right. And so a greenhouse gas has the ability to hold on to heat in our atmosphere. On one hand, naturally occurring greenhouse gases make the surface temperature of the earth habitable, but it's when we have an excess of greenhouse gases that it tends to trap too much heat. And especially if we've already contributed ancient greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, additional greenhouse effect is going to be and continues to be a problem. Okay, so with that said, I don't want to freak you out, but there is something that we can do, right? All right, so at this point, we have question number 2, right? Here's question number 2 for our trivia. Which was the first book to set the stage for society to change and becoming more environmentally aware? Was it, and I'm sorry, this should be A, B, C, and D. Was it The Lorax by Dr. Seuss? That would be A. The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Palin? That would be B. C is Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And then D, Population Bomb by Paul Ehrlich. Okay, what do you guys think?
It's like Dr. Emmons says C, Silent Spring. Dan says A, The Lorax. Jody says C, Silent Spring.
C, Silent Spring is the correct answer. All right, very good. Okay, so there is one more. You have one more chance for trivia reward at the end of my presentation. Okay, so look, I've been trying to highlight what some of the problems are with number 1, having too much food waste. Number 2, identifying where most of that food waste goes, and that is into our landfills. So as a means of trying on an individual family level to reduce that side effect of having waste go into the landfill, I'm going to pose to you that composting your kitchen waste at home has some benefits. And if you are plant friendly, right? So if, like I said, I'm an avid gardener, so I live across the street from my community garden. Every year I have to amend my soil, right? If you have houseplants, you might want to have an organic fertilizer. Well, I'm going to tell you, if you compost your waste with worms in your home, really in your home, you will in a few months be able to actually have that material. Worms will eat any organic matter, and it's not just any kind of worm. I'll give you more specifics here in a few minutes. And what they excrete, they call worm castings, are very, very high, have a high percent of what is referred to as humus. Humus is very broken down organic matter that has lots of nutrients and microorganisms, as it turns out, that promote really good plant growth and plant health. Here's another advantage. The castings also contain a little bit of slime from the worms. I know that doesn't sound beneficial, but it actually does hold the sediment grains, because soil's not only organic matter, but it's sand grains, silt grains, clay grains. It holds those grains together to actually make pathways for air and oxygen to get down into the sediment, into the soil. And well, frankly, the worms themselves burrowing in create those pathways. So you benefit because you are getting those extra nutrients and also helping the soil to be aerated. Okay, so I do want to now move into, so maybe you've decided that you do want to actually attempt this worm composting. All right, so what are you going to do? Well, you have to make your worm bed. All right, now, since I haven't actually done this quite yet, I can tell you that I've done, I'm not going to say an exhaustive search, because if you've ever searched for information on YouTube, you know that there's a lot of people that like to post videos that they find to be helpful. And well, I think I found one. This woman has done a couple of different videos. She actually has what she refers to as a homestead, where they have they compost with worms, but they also grow their own vegetables. They have chickens. So I found this video to be really, really helpful. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play a portion of her YouTube video. So she does a really excellent job of describing how to build the worm composting bed. So I'm going to start the video here, and I hope I clicked on, nope, here we go. Let's do the sound. All right, let me know if you guys have any trouble hearing.
Compost too is not to put a lot of like onion material and not a lot of citrus. So not a lot of onions and citrus, or like hot peppers. Worms are funny. Apparently they don't really like spicy food all that much. You don't want to do processed food, overly moldy food, or anything that's overly really rotten and soggy either. That's going to not only not be great for the worms, but it's going to make your bin get stinky. So we do like a lot of leafy greens or apple cores, banana peels, the end trimmings of, the butt of a cabbage and things like that. The other no-nos is that you don't want to do any animal manure, so no chicken feces, no cat and dog stuff, and also no dairy products and things like that. Okay, so the last thing that I want to add before we go ahead and add all this material to the bin is that when I rehydrated the cocoa core, I made sure that it wasn't like crazy wet, because again, we're looking for that nice balanced consistency of a wrung out sponge. So this is moist but not too wet, and then once we get everything in there, we'll kind of see how wet it is and possibly add a little bit more water. So I'm going to go ahead, rearrange the camera, give you guys a close-up of all of this material added to the bin, and then we'll get our worms put in there. Okay, so we went ahead and we added our cocoa core in here, so you can see it's nice and fluffy and damp. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to mix in some of this paper. So we'll get some shredded paper in here. I might not do all this, we'll do about half of this here. And get that, whoops, kind of mixed up for them. And so with this, we're not going to be able to harvest worm castings from this for probably a couple months because they're going to need to work to break all this down a bit before it's actually finished worm castings. So I just want to get that mixed as best I can, break up that paper. Okay, and then the other last thing that I want to add in here with this is some of our soil. So this is just our native sandy soil here, just gives a little bit of grit for them. So again, you can even use potting soil if that's all you have, whatever works. So I'm going to get that mixed in. Okay. All right, so that's looking like pretty good worm bedding. Okay, so now what we want to do when we add our worms is we want to make a nice little bit of a bed for them, even though this is all bedding. But basically, you know, because worms like to be buried, I'm going to make, oh, here goes Ginger. Yay, Ginger, thank you. We're going to make a little bit of a bed for them here. and because they want to be buried. So we're going to end up putting the worms down in here and their food and then going ahead and burying them. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the food first and I'll put the worms in on top of it. So that's our little crock. Pour that in there. And now we have chickens. So Aaron went ahead and spoiled the worms and he cut up a bunch of comfrey this morning. So there's comfrey in here. There's some apple cores and then some little bits of, you know, things from our kitchen. There's a banana peel and some food for them. And then again, we'll kind of assess and see how much they go through. And then here's our worms. So I'm going to dig in here. I want to grab a nice big handful for you guys. I'll just dump them in a second, but I want you guys to really be able to see these guys. So there they are. Hi, worms. Welcome, worms. So those are the compost worms. Again, these guys are amazing little creatures. I'm trying to remember all the statistics, but they have something like 7 hearts and they're hermaphroditic and asexual and they just reproduce with themselves and they will reproduce rapidly too. So we start with about 1,000 or a pound here, but they're going to definitely populate really well in this worm bin. So we're going to get those added. Ooh, nice. Look at that nice little ball of worms. And they're not as creepy as people think. Don't be afraid of these guys. They're really not that slimy. All right. So I'm going to get the rest of them poured in there in their new home. Tons of worms. Awesome. I'm excited. And you might be wondering why we're setting up another worm bin too, and that's because our other worm bin got a big old crack. It was like 5 years old, so we needed a new bin anyway, so we figured it was a perfect opportunity to go ahead and show you guys how we do this, but we're also going to grab the worm population out of our old bin and add it to this one as well, so we'll have even more worms in this bin. And then, so they're all in there, they've got some food in there, we're going to go ahead and give them a cover. So after you feed them, you always want to cover them up so they can be happy, just as if they were underground, happy little worms. It seems a little bit dry in here, so I might water it a little bit. And then another trick that I wanted to show you guys for when you first add worms to a new worm bin is sometimes they can kind of freak out and they might want to leave. A lot of people see them crawling up the sides, trying to get out. And so to help reduce that and have them kind of settle in here before, you know, they get used to the environment is just with newspaper. So what we're going to do is layer newspaper on top, and then we'll get it wet. And so we'll just damp the newspaper a little bit. Again, I might dampen the whole bin a little bit more too, but then by putting this on top, it kind of prevents them, and it keeps it nice and dark, prevents them from wanting to leave as much. So we'll put a nice little layer of newspaper, and then you can just peel this back when you feed them. I wanted to tell you a couple more things though, so I'm going to take it off for now just so I can show you, but we will add that. So when you're going to actually feed your bin or your worms, we usually alternate different sides for different weeks. So this time I just fed them in here. Next week, since this side's already low, then I'll go ahead and I'll put food here and then cover it, and they'll kind of migrate back and forth and feed. You can keep feeding in the same spot, that's fine, but when it comes time to actually harvesting worm castings, so say that this is a couple months later and it's finished worm castings, and this is what they look like. So they're nice and fluffy and rich. Basically, again, that consistency of a wrung out sponge. So that is what this entire bin is going to turn into, is these worm castings. So I'll just put a few in here. Why not? Inoculate it with the good stuff, right? So this stuff, once you want to actually harvest it, to keep the worms out of it, and I'll show a whole nother video, I think, and post about harvesting worm castings, because we screen it and we do a few different little things. But one thing that helps get you to that point is that if you know you're getting ready to want to harvest, because that's the one thing that's a little different about this system instead of those worm towers that actually have layers and stacks, is that if you feed them on one side of the bin, they will migrate over to that side and eat just from there. And so if you know you want to harvest soon, keep feeding them on one side of the bin for a few weeks, and then leave one side with basically just finished castings. The worms will migrate over, they'll eat over here, and then you can harvest from this side and screen it out to remove any extra big like food particles that are left over, or big chunks of paper and stuff, to actually utilize your castings.
Okay, I'm going to pause there, because what I was really trying to do is to get you to be able to see what the process is for starting the bed. Now, there's a couple of basic things that she did talk about that I want to go back and review with you. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint and we can do that. So first and foremost, you have to kind of plan for what size worm bed you want to make. So kind of a rule of thumb, and I believe that she mentioned this, is that if you're a family of 2 is typically going to produce about a half a pound of food waste per week, right? And so the bin that you really want to look for should be about, it says 2 by 2 feet, right, in area. And if you go 2 feet high, that works out to be about a 15-gallon bin. So that was pretty close to the size of the bin that she used. Now, notice that they also drilled holes at the top along the, not in the lid, there actually is a lid that they'll put on, but toward the top of the bin, they drilled holes, and that's so that air can get in and the worms can have oxygen. You saw that she used shredded newspaper. You can use shredded cardboard. The core that she was mentioning, the coca core, is actually the fibrous outside of a coconut. And so that is available, that you can buy through worm farmers, or like a Home Depot, I believe. You can, a garden center, you can use that. And the whole point is that you shred up the cardboard, shred up the newspaper, and moisten it. Don't soak it, you just need to moisten it. And then the other thing that she did was that she added some garden soil, because it's really important that the worms have mineral material as something that they can ingest, and that helps to break down the food in their gut. Okay, so it's beneficial for the digestion, and also for getting some of those microbes that they require. The last point that I also wanted to make is, how many worms do you start with, right? If you go online, there's a couple of pretty popular places that are essentially worm farms that you can purchase your worms. A good number to start with, and I believe she mentioned that, is about 1,000 worms, right? So since they tend to live in the upper 6 to 8 inches, you got to hear that the worms are going to move around from one side to the other depending on where the food supply is. Okay, so those are some of the key things that you want to keep in mind. Again, you're really going to only want to feed the worms about once a week, and you don't want to overfeed, because if it gets too wet or too much food, it can become anaerobic and it will start to smell. So that's not a condition that you really want for your worm bed. Okay, next slide. All right, so what kind of worms do you need? Whoops, sorry about that. So we're not talking about just earthworms. There's a particular variety of worm called a red wriggler. There's the species, 2 species names there for you, that are really geared for food waste composting. You can go out in your backyard and dig up earthworms, but the problem with earthworms is that they don't break down the waste as easily. So most of the websites that I reviewed really recommended you purchase these particular worms. As we saw in the video, they don't seem to be as big and gross as maybe some earthworms. So if you're a little skittish, you can use these guys instead. Okay, now the other thing that she was pointing out is, what kind of vegetables, what kind of food should I feed my worms, and what should we avoid? All right, well, one of the things is, most fruits and vegetables are going to be easily consumed by the worms. It's better if you cut them into smaller pieces. So say like a watermelon rind, you might want to cut it down into smaller pieces. You definitely want to avoid any meat product, right? Any dairy. And surprisingly, but then not so much, you don't want to give your worms any citrus or onions. Citrus because it tends to lower the pH, make it a little more acidic in the worm bed. And onions, they just have a heck of a time chewing that kind of dry outside skin. And also, I think she mentioned peppers, right? So, but pretty much after that, those are the foods that are good to feed your worms. Okay, now where are you going to place your bin? Because as I've said, you can keep this in your home, right? Now, especially in Northeast Ohio, if you want to have your worms outside of your home, you can do that, through the spring, summer, and fall. You just have to be mindful of the outside temperature, right? Ideal conditions for your worm bed is anywhere between 55 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. In places where, like I said, if the temperature gets super hot, they don't do as well, and you definitely don't want to freeze them. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is that the worms can also be impacted by vibrations that makes them kind of nervous. So I saw one recommendation was not to place them by washing machines or dryers or dishwashers. I've heard of people actually keeping a smaller bin underneath the sink, and so it just made it easier to kind of feed the worms. But I'm leaning toward putting mine in my basement where the temperature is a little bit more moderated, at least through the warmer months. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, it takes about 2 months to get your worms started and having them producing their castings. You may hear people, gardeners, talk about black gold. That's what those castings are. So after 2 months and maybe even longer, you think you want to kind of extract some of that really good processed castings. So she did actually, I should know this person's name, but she actually does have another video where she shows you how to get the castings out, right? So one of the techniques, or one of the important parts of the technique, is to actually, if you've been feeding your worms on, say, the right side of the bed, about a week before you want to go in and harvest, you will put the food scraps on the opposite side, right, and cover up your worms, and the worms would literally migrate over and start to feed on the food that's available. So if you do that about a week out, then you have access to the processed worm castings. So at this point, I was going to go ahead again and show this particular video where she talks about how to extract those castings. All right.
And do some harvesting for you now. Okay, so here is the inside of that worm bin. We fed them over into this corner. So let's actually see. Maybe I can see if we can see some worms here. Oh, yep. So Aaron gave them some apple and stuff. I don't see a ton of them in here because, again, we actually took a bit of this population out already and put it in our other bin. So I'm not seeing a ton. Oh, there's a little cluster of them. There they are. They're down a little deeper. I don't want to disturb them all right now. But there are some of our worms. Hey, buddies. So we'll get that buried back up. So that was kind of the little pile that we made so that we could harvest from this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scoop a bunch into this bucket and then we'll bring it over onto the screen to screen it. So getting through, and you can see how fine, nice, and fluffy the worm castings are, ready to be used. And I'm not seeing a lot of worms in here, so they've migrated the way that they're supposed to. We're just going to scoop out a good amount. Yep, not seeing many worms at all right now. And how much you harvest depends on the project that you're doing, obviously. So if you are really heavily amending a bed, you might want to take a ton. If you're just, and by a ton, I mean, however much you can spare from your bin. But then if you're just, say, planting a tree or something like that, or a plant, a single thing, you might just want a nice little handful. So you can periodically, you don't have to, it's a big pit of some sort. You don't have to harvest huge amounts like this and screen huge amounts every time you need to use it. We're getting rid of a good amount because we're actually going to make aerated compost tea, which is a whole nother tutorial and video that I'm going to prepare for you guys. So we are harvesting a bit, and again, getting rid of this tote. Normally, I probably wouldn't take even quite this much at a time. I would just take a few scoops for whatever little project we're doing. So it just depends on what you need. A little bit goes a long way, though, with worm castings. So we've got the screen set up with a tote below so we can catch this stuff. And I'm just going to do a little bit at a time, pour some castings on here, and just kind of sift it through. And again, this stuff's already pretty broken down. We haven't been feeding this bed for that long. You can wear gloves if you want to. I'm not going to worry about it too much. And just work that back and forth. There are some sharp pits. I think Aaron put some stone fruit pits or something in here. All right, so there's some big chunks. Some of this might even be like barky stuff from wood from the yard. I'm not really sure. So I don't even see any worms right now. So we did a pretty good job about tricking them and getting them to go. So I'm just going to push that kind of out of the side. Oh, there's one worm. One little guy made it through. I'm going to toss him back over there. Okay, and do some more. Work that through. Nope, sorry worm. I do feel bad when they get kind of stuck on there, so I'll just usually shove them through if they're stuck. Okay, a couple big chunks. Apparently worms don't like cranberries. We had a whole thing of some random plastic crap in there. We had a whole thing of cranberries in the freezer still from the holidays that needed to go, so we put it in here, and they have not eaten them. Okay, so there are the chunks. I'm going to leave them be. I'm a mess. And we'll just push that aside and check that out. So this are all of our finished screen castings. So it's as simple as that. Now we can take this amazing black gold natural fertilizer, broken down organic matter, really high in beneficial microbes. It increases soil moisture retention and drainage. Just a great, great natural fertilizer. So again, we're going to make some compost tea with this. So stay tuned in to that video, and that'll be.
Okay, so let me go back. So it seems like it's a pretty straightforward technique to harvest the castings, right? And the only reason that they were kind of running it through that grater screen is so they could get out the larger pieces that haven't broken down, right? So let's go to the next slide. I just thought it was more helpful to actually show you from somebody that has actually done the process. All right, so I did put a couple more links at the end of the presentation where I got some information, and both of these EPA websites are really good, and they have lots of links on how to, again, to build a bed, to maintain the bed, and just the benefits of composting. last slide is going to be your third and final trivia question. Okay, so by the end of 1970, the year that the first Earth Day was, right? So we already knew that. The Environmental Protection Agency was created, but which of the following acts was not passed at the same time? Okay, so was it the Clean Air Act A? Was it the Clean Water Act B, the Endangered Species Act C, or the Marine Mammal Protection Act? So again, if you will put your answer into the chat and I will share the correct answer. Amy, do you have a sense for what it is?
I'm so bad at this stuff. I would guess the Clean Water Act.
Oh, sorry,
No,
Amy. No. Guys,
Uh,
the correct answer was actually D, the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So all the other acts were also enacted at the end of 1970.
Great. And that looks like Kim submitted that one directly to me, so she is our third trivia winner.
Yay.
Thanks everyone for participating. I'll be in contact with everybody afterwards on how to arrange pickup or delivery of your prizes.
Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of the information I have. So we have at least 3 minutes left for questions. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer. And if I don't know the answer, if you want to put your email in the chat, I'll research the answer and get it to you. So does anybody have any questions, comments? How often should the worms be fed? Oh, I'm sorry, I can read it now, Aim. It seemed to me it was about once every week. So that was kind of the rule of thumb. Yep. Anybody else? So like I said, I'm definitely interested in trying this. Now, I can also share that more recently, there have been companies that have started up. There's actually one in Cleveland. Let me answer the question coming in from Bonnie. So the broad implication here, Bonnie, is the food waste, if it ends up in the landfill, will produce greenhouse gases, both methane and carbon dioxide. And so as you already know, we have been burning fossil fuels that are essentially that are greenhouse gases that have been locked up into hydrocarbons, so coal and natural gas and oil, and so by adding extra CO2 and methane, that's just kind of contributing to the problem. I just got a new compost bin and just got my worms on Saturday. Oh, that's so exciting! Oh my gosh, you'll have to keep us posted in a couple of months, see how your castings look. That's exciting. Okay, anybody else? Oh, good. All right.
Any last questions? Just a few more moments. I just want to say thank you again, Dr. Clement, for this amazing presentation. I had no idea that, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward and simple. So
yeah,
easy to do.
And the one thing I will just finish up with, like I said, whether it's the EPA or a number of different websites, they actually have like troubleshooting too. So if things start to go wrong with your worm bed, there's lots of really good information out there to try to problem solve. Okay. All right.